Hi there, good morning everybody and welcome from the EASA studio here in Cologne. My name's John Franklin, I'm Head of Safety Promotion here at EASA and I'm joined here in the studio by my colleague. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Good morning everyone, my name is Jean-Pierre Arnaud, I am in charge of safety management activities here at the agency.
We were hoping this morning to be joined by our Head of Safety Intelligence and Performance, but fortunately he's not able to join us. But we're going to start off just with a quick introduction about the Safety Week, what's going on, what's happening throughout the course of the week, and hopefully just to kind of give you a feeling and a flavour for all the different things that we've got available to help as many people across the industry as possible in these challenging times as we head through to the summer. So back in 2021, this time last year, almost a year to the day, we hosted this first Safety Week. And this year we're back. We've got more domain specific sessions. We did have some comments last year that there weren't sessions for certain groups of people, particularly on the cabin side and the passenger side, for example. So we've introduced some extra sessions. One of the other things we've done is we've refreshed all of the campaign material that we made for last year's ramp up, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. But you can scan the QR code there on the screen and that will take you to the AirOps community site where you can download all the different domain packages and all the Stronger, Safer Together campaign material that is intended to really support having open and positive conversations about safety wherever you are. So that's really what Safety Week for us is all about. It's about creating an environment for us all as an industry to talk about the different challenges we've got. And it's something we've created for the course of this week with people from across industry for the industry. It's not EASA here telling you specifically about certain things. As you'll see in this first session, we've got people who are living these challenges every day in their own organizations, and we're here to have them share the kind of things they're doing, what's working in their SMS, for example, particularly in the context of this session, but in the different domain sessions, what are the different challenges, what solutions are working, and really just kind of opening up that discussion. And that's the same with all the campaign materials. So there's particularly the PowerPoint for the different domains. And what we really encourage you to do is to take those in your own organizations and think about the different points in them. How are we dealing with this problem? Is this an issue for us? Those kinds of things. So hopefully you'll join us for as many of these sessions as are relevant to your domain. We didn't imagine that everybody would spend 3 whole days listening to Jean-Pierre and I talk all different people through the different domain sessions. What we imagine, I guess, is people will join the sessions that they're most interested in and that apply to them. We'll be recording all of the sessions and putting them on the community site so you can watch them all later. And what we're really encouraging everybody to hopefully is have a safe summer, use the material to support your own activities. And then in September, the 13th to the 15th of September, we'll have our Safe 360 conference, which is then about reviewing the summer, talking about the safety issues and looking at the solutions and what can we do in the European Plan for Aviation Safety, and at more tactical operational level to solve problems, then prepare over the winter and prepare for next summer and all of these different things. So this week we're very much about practical solutions to operational problems, and hopefully we're going to have a really good discussion. And JP, we've got quite a good week of sessions coming up, I think.
Thank you, John, and good to have you on board with us today. So as you can see, it will span over 3 days. It will be quite demanding, 9 sessions. The first one will focus on management of safety. We call it safety management system. And the topic we have selected is resilience and management of safety in these difficult times we are all experiencing. It's a cross-domain session. It's not specific to a specific domain as opposite to all the other sessions except the last one. So in fact, during lunchtime today, you will have a very thorough presentation of all the risks that we have identified during this COVID-19 crisis. But there will be also, we will present the top safety issue with the war in Ukraine, and unfortunately, I'm sure there will be more to identify and control. So it will be a risk management session, if I may say so, to be sure that all these risks are properly mitigated. The rest of the week will be dedicated to individual domain. So topics that we have not discussed last year, but this year we were of opinion it was an important one. It was about managing the passenger journey. With this fifth or seventh wave of COVID-19 variant, and I'm a bit lost how many ways we are now experiencing, but it's pretty sure that there will be a lot to take into consideration, the different health restrictions at the borders. Unfortunately, we can fear some disruptive passengers. Sometimes it's not clear whether people have to have the mask on or not. So
yeah, and maybe it's worth mentioning that particular session. So I'm going to be leading that. We've got a specific group working on disruptive passengers, and we're going to use that session as that. We're getting ready to launch a big disruptive passenger campaign on the 18th of July, and we want as many people to be involved. So yeah, we're going to be talking a lot about that at that session.
So tomorrow we will give the floor to our industry expert in the domain of aerodrome, air operation, and training. I think the last session will be quite interesting because there will be probably lessons learned from remote training sessions. It will be quite interesting. And then the last day, Wednesday, will be dedicated to our colleagues in the field of ANS ATS. And we will give the floor, the stage also to our colleagues in charge of continuing airworthiness, maintenance, and the last very session this time will not be dedicated to one specific domain, but it will be how to behave, the role of safety culture, the role of leadership, especially for operational and frontline manager. And then we will wrap up all the session. That means we will take notes. All the important topics that have been discussed will be summarized at the very end of the session, and we will invite our director to close the session. Just to tell you also that this is a very interactive event. So you have the option with a Slido to log your question, and at the end of each session we will invite the expert to read and answer your question. And if there are any questions, we have no burning question for which we do not have time to answer it, we can do that at a later stage. For some session, we have planned some polls, and this will be the case for this for the first session today. John, would you go to the next slide?
Perfect, thanks. And so one of the things we thought we'd just start with really, really quickly is the basics of what we put together. It's kind of evolved since last year, is this Stronger, Safer Together campaign. And one of the ironies of doing a safety week is that, actually that's the complete opposite of what we want, really, is we introduced this term always, because ultimately it's the positive safety conversations we have between, the whole, in a whole organization all of the time, and not something that, ironically, we run a safety week as if safety week, we talk about safety and then the rest of the time we don't. And I think that's one of the key things. And that's really what we're trying to do with this campaign, and really focus when we talk about safety is how do we create and maintain all of the things we need to enable safe and effective operations, whether that's as an organization as a whole, whether as leaders and managers and safety experts, or as individuals at the front line of operations. And we split things into these two kind of be ready, stay safe areas, really as kind of 6 key building blocks of the campaign and of safe operations. And on the be ready side, we have, culture, how do we create the trust to support positive safety conversations, support just culture, encourage people to report the safety challenges as, the things that the operational staff have challenges with every day, and how can we solve those within our organizations. Then from the people side, particularly challenging at the moment for sure, do we have enough skilled, qualified, competent people who are then operationally ready and fit for duty? And that's one of the key things we've been talking about a lot, is the well-being side of things. What does it mean to be operationally ready in terms of how the organization supports that, and the personal responsibility of us as individuals. From resources, we'll hear for sure a lot in many of the sessions about the resources, the infrastructure, particularly in the airworthiness session about bringing aircraft back to service, which has just been a huge effort from so many people. And then on the staying safe side, we've deliberately split the compliance piece, and we do a lot of these webinars to help now people understand compliance with the rules. So we've been doing webinars on evidence-based training on all-weather operations. We've got one coming up next week on fuel, on Thursday on the ground handling rules, new ground handling rules. And then in addition to the compliance is then, do we really know and understand our risks and mitigate them as part of a resilient management system, and then learn? And it's about having a positive approach to learning and solving problems. And that's really where we are today, is here to talk about the risks that we face and how can we learn from that, and particularly share from our fantastic panel that we've got, who are out there in operational organizations using their management systems every day to solve operational challenges and keep safety and the operation moving. And hopefully you'll learn a lot from their experiences and from the questions that we'll get. Just then to move on to that kind of housekeeping side of this, just so you know how all of this is going to work as we really start getting into the discussion. So we have up to 700 people on some of these sessions. So one of the things, you've probably been there in the Zoom or the WebEx calls during the pandemic, where people accidentally leave their microphones on and all of these things. So within this WebEx webinar tool that we use, only the panelists are able to turn their cameras on and unmute. If there is a really burning question and a question that we can potentially find an individual, it's not so easy. So in terms of asking questions, ideally, so you'll see within hopefully the bottom right hand corner, you should have apps and Slido, which then enables you to firstly ask questions of your own, but then also you can see other questions that have been asked and then kind of upvote your favorite questions, and you'll see those then, the ones that move to the top, and then we'll try and take them in that kind of preference order, and see how we get on there. You'll also see there the different polls, and we'll start the first one very shortly, just to get some kind of feeling and give you something to interact with as part of the session. As I say, we are recording these, and we'll post them on the AirOps community site in the campaign area, and we'll also put them on the Together for Safety YouTube channel if you haven't seen that either. And then the other thing, just to let you know, sometimes we have the odd problem with sound, or you have a technical glitch. One thing I would say is, if at any point you have a problem and you're not using a Chrome browser, the first thing is maybe to try using Chrome. We know that from experience that solved a lot of problems. But if you do have a technical problem, you want to ask kind of me a technical question or something specific, feel free to drop that in the chat section. So there is also a Q&A part of WebEx, but we'll kind of ignore that for now because we're using Slido instead. So Slido for questions, chat if you want anything else. And I think that's everything. And JP, we're going to start the actual SMS and resilience discussion now. And maybe you could start by introducing our panel members.
Yeah. So first, I would like to thank many thanks to our panel members. We have invited Björn from Icelander. He's currently a manager managing the safety office at Icelander. We have also invited from German Airways David Wend. He's a director of technical operation and accountable manager. And we are also very happy to have Nick Pelham from EasyJet. He is ground operation quality and safety manager, and he has probably a lot to tell us about risk at the interfaces.
And I'm thinking maybe we just, if I stop sharing my screen and they can introduce themselves so everybody can see who they actually are on the screen. So maybe Bjorn, do you want to go first? Just say hi from your side so they can see who you are. Or you're muted, Bjorn.
I can't believe 2 years of COVID and you still do the mute problem. Hello, everybody. My name is Björn Guðmundsson. Most people call me Bubby, or as I work in the safety industry for a while, people Bjorn in Icelandic means bear, so people call me Safety Bear as well. I work for Icelandair. I'm the head of safety department there, and run the SMS program. And very excited about the discussions today.
Fantastic, thanks, Bjorn. And David, maybe you could just introduce yourself.
Yes, yeah, David Wayne, greetings from Cologne, but here at the airport. Yeah, Director of Technical Operations and running accountable manager at 145. And interesting perspectives here as well, as we're in the phase of reinforcing and structuring our SMS programs in the maintainers environment. So happy to be here and looking forward to the dialogue and discussions.
Fantastic, thanks, David. And Nick?
Yeah, thanks, John. Nick Pelham, Ground Operations Quality and Safety Manager for EasyJet. Currently in a very rainy Manchester, so normal services resume with the weather in the northwest of England. So really glad to be here today. Looking forward to the debate.
Fantastic, great. So now you know who our panelists are. I suddenly realised that it was when everybody's a tiny little thumbnail, it's not so easy to do. So we'll share the screen again, and JP, back to you.
And I would use that opportunity to say that in the European regulatory framework, no safety management through the management system is mandatory for maintenance organization, but also for design and production organization. So I think with our guest, our panelist, we can cover most of the domain. And that will be quite interesting. Let me tell you a little bit more about this session. We have selected the topic of management system, safety management system, and resilience. So what is the definition of resilience? The ability to be happy, successful after some difficulties or bad experience has happened. So this is exactly what we experienced with COVID, and unfortunately, I'm fear it's not over. We have also the war in Ukraine, and during the next session, we will introduce some safety issue generated by this war in the east of Europe, and I'm sure there will be more to come, unfortunately. So there are clearly vulnerabilities and drift in the management of safety when we experience so many disruptive events. And we know that currently we are under highly commercial and financial pressure. We could also mention the pressure from the shareholders, and finally, its aviation is always subject to fierce competition. So, how to be resilient with all these disruptive events, and how to be sure that safety remains at the heart of the operations. This is exactly what we're gonna speak today with our guest, and what are the foundation of a good and effective safety management system. And we all know that we are not immune to pressure. Unfortunately, it doesn't announce itself So how to inform, how to detect, how to identify the impact of all these pressures. The system is highly complex. It has been seriously checked by all these crises. For sure, at the agency, as playing the role of regulator, we can prescribe as much as possible, but we cannot address all the risk, and especially the emerging risk stemming from these disruptive events, which leads me to my next key message, which is, unfortunately, compliance does not guarantee safety. The regulator doesn't have time to amend the rules and take into account all these new risks emerging from these disruptive events. And in addition to that, a key element to remain resilient is likely to be how managers and accountable managers behave and instill positive safety culture everywhere within the organization. So unfortunately, the organization face the realities. They should not deny the realities. They should not defy the reality. Unfortunately, probably the work is not as imagined, and it is very important to look after any kind of indicators of signals that can inform you about degradation of safety within the organization. And this deep inspection should be not only inside the organization, but there are many risks outside the organization, for instance, financial pressure, shareholder pressure, how to work with subcontractors, etc., etc. So consider any useful information, listen to the operational staff, that's probably good recommendation. Do not break under pressure, adjust, report, learn from the situation, and inform your higher management so that action can be timely and appropriately taken. Just two bullets on the screen here. I think due to all these disruptive events, it's quite important to consider the current resources. Do you have enough people? Do you lack people? We have heard many stories about people that have been asked to go home and not work anymore. Some of them, unfortunately, their experience has been lost, if I may say so, or degraded over time. So how to be sure that people, you have enough people and competent staff, and think also of the human performance. Unfortunately, we heard many times, do more with less, but the system is probably already stretched to the limit. So how to cope with this kind of issue.
And I guess part of this now at the moment is, there are so many organisations having challenges recruiting in so many different areas, that what does that mean in terms of the risk to the organisation when you have less people to do certain things, I guess, is one of the key challenges.
Unfortunately, in the news, this is what we have been informed of that. So don't be passive, lead, take action, monitor, report. And this is all these kind of enablers that are the foundation of a good safety SMS. So this is what we are going to discuss with our panelists today. So we will split the session into three parts. We will look to a certain extent into the rear mirror. What are the lessons learned from the pandemic? Which role should play or will play safety culture, reporting culture, and also the importance of data I was talking of signal to identify issue within the organization. What are the key challenges in effective SMS implementation? And for that, we are going to get the first question in the poll active.
I've just done it.
Okay,
already.
thank you, John. Then after that, we will look ahead. There are many more to keep under control. So how does your organization get prepared for the peak of operation, the peak of traffic expected this summer? We expect the traffic to be almost back to the volume we had in 2019 before the pandemic. So how to keep with the up and down of this crisis, and how to keep safety at the heart of the operation and not to bow to pressure. The last part of the session will be dedicated to questions. So I do invite you to log your question in the system. For that, you have to get registered on Slido. So you don't need to get registered. You have to go directly to Slido.
It's built within the WebEx, so you should just be able to ask your questions.
Exactly.
And
so
they'll come straight up.
So again, ask your question, upvote for the most relevant one. And now we have activated the first question for the poll. So feel free participating to the poll. I would like to give the floor maybe to John. What have you learned from all these events?
I'd say it's been like probably for most organizations within the industry, it's been a learning curve for I would say at least the last 3 years. So for looking at Icelandair, we had numerous challenges going into COVID as well. We are operating 737 Maxes as well. Had them, they were grounded for a partial time. And it does stress the organization. It does put commercial pressure on, making things work with limited amount of resources as well. Going into COVID, we had to adjust and adapt and try to figure that out. So originally, we started just looking at the drivers. What could we do to help or enable a more resilient SMS? And we have a saying in Iceland. It's called "Eftir höfðinu dansa limirnir," which basically means the limb follows the head, at least most of the time. And we try to figure out, how can we send the positive message about an open conversation about what's going on, so we can actively really identify the risks that are going on. So we had a discussion with our board, and we set up a safety review group in the board of directors at Icelandair at the highest level, to send a very clear message that safety is something that we need to discuss all through the organization. And it helps out as well. So we start every board meeting at Icelandair with a 10-minute safety review to go over the key risks, to have an open conversations from the top down, what's going on. So then we have our safety action groups and our safety ambassador programs putting their concerns, and then we have data as well to kind of have the same risk being discussed at the bottom, at the top. So there's no interlag in between. So that's one of the first things we did, and that really helped us, have a conversation that was unilateral through the organization, and it helped us adapt quicker when we were starting the ramp up as well, and then looking at how we can fix it. So in terms of resources, for example, it's a big issue for most of the industry. Not only are we looking at how we can do things more effectively, but we are as well looking for individuals to do the work. I've spoken a lot about this for CAMOs, for example. Most airlines that have CAMOs, they have been dealing with individuals that have maybe been working pretty hard and running, kind of doing a marathon for the last 3 years. But the aviation industry stopped for a bit, but all the CAMOs were still going. So we have some very tired people within our organization as well, and we are dealing with that. And we're just trying to have a very open discussion on how we can fix that, because the skill set is very unique. On the pilot side, we've had a big return of our pilots, and we're seeing some risks in that as well. We have individuals that have been, away for a bit, and then we're trying to figure out how we can mitigate that. But our best strategies have been having open conversation, information flows, having all our directors and post holders having a very clear message of what's going on, and kind of emphasizing the importance of being safe. But it's a struggle every day, and we're always trying to find new solutions. So I'm very happy to have this discussion here with you guys.
Thank you, Bjorn. I think it's quite interesting, and that's something we can discuss later. Who has safety information and who has access to the safety information, and how to manage, and which level information should be managed. That's something we can discuss. David, welcome. What are your main enablers that you put in place to cope with the crisis?
Yeah, well, the crisis, last year when I was able to participate as a panelist as well, in my presentation, we put in the development of our flight activities, and the chart looked like a roller coaster. Every wave, things would go up, it would come down, it would go up, and it actually became quite a plannable. By the fifth wave, we were sort of getting used to when things would drop right off, and perhaps when 4 to 6 weeks later, things would start picking back up. From learning this, we learned and extracted from that to help prepare ourselves with manpower, with resource planning, that we're being a little bit more proactive, just because there's nothing, most of our flights and most of our aircraft are on the ground. The camo is busy, the maintenance is busy in low utilization work, but going back to ensuring that the rest of the organization is ready, that in 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 weeks, it's not going to go back to pre-pandemic levels, but we have to be operationally active. A few things we picked up in that is also at management level, picking up on Bjorn also mentioned, we took our safety management review meetings, and we put them onto a weekly basis. The post holders and the NPs come together weekly, and we discuss all open and new safety reports. I think that's something we should have been doing from day one, but it's something we learned in the pandemic. The interdisciplinary, the buy-in, but also knowing what in the neighboring departments is going on. And quite often we were finding interfaces in the safety reports being made, or alerting to people, hold on, there's some things on the edge of your department that may not be directly, it may not be your report to take care of, but your colleagues a few doors down have a few things that they're dealing with that maybe we can collaborate and assist with. That really brought the team together much tighter, and also it changed the way we look at safety reports. Allowed us to be able to go in and work with our teams, the people on the coal face, to better understand what needs to be reported. Jumping into the subject of a maintainer, maintainers live in a very structured, we record every defect, technical observations, discrepancies, we have our process and our means. It's very regulated. Where, what gaps are used in a safety management system to report? And it's very easy for say SMS systems and reporting systems to perhaps be, might have forgotten something, so we'll just put it in as an SMS report. Well, that's, to be able to break the potential incorrect usage of the system. But generally, looking back in the rearview mirror, for us, it was a chance for the core team to come together to better understand the reporting structure, and to be able to work closer with our teams to understand moving forward, because we know as the ramp up that we're currently in, everything changes. Now we're too busy to do the preparation. So we have to put the means and the measures in place before. Going back on that, now in the ramp up, just a comment we've noticed and observations which are causing us a little bit of concern. Once you start establishing the buy-in, you're starting to get the reports, you're getting the interaction in place, ramp up, the flight hours are increasing, utilization, workload is increasing, but the number of reports coming through is dropping. And that's an indicating factor that says, well, we haven't got the job completely done here. We haven't perfected the process. The more we're operating should mean the more reports that should be coming in. And that's one of the challenges that we're currently dealing with, is in the ever increasing and busy workload that the reports still come through. Okay.
Yeah, and I guess that's particularly where the feedback element within the organization is a challenge. You know, it's like I've seen this in my previous life before I came to EASA, where people start reporting, but there comes a point, you know, it's that challenge of, you know, how do you keep that engine running? I think it's one of the biggest things, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, indeed.
So that's a very good indicators in case regarding reporting system. And I think you use some very important words: be proactive and anticipate. Don't discover the situation at the last minute. And it was also quite interesting that you, John and David, you had exactly the same enabler, which is more frequent safety board meeting in order to take the right decision timely. Quite interesting. Let me give the floor to Nick. Probably, for instance, what was the frequency before the pandemic in terms of safety board meeting, and did you change anything?
So I think it's a really sort of like good question, and I find it really interesting that we've all kind of like come to the same conclusion in terms of what we do in terms of frequency of meetings. It's something that we definitely changed within EasyJet. So we kind of like, we've always historically had a monthly SAG meeting within ground operations, but we actually increased the frequency of that to weekly. So we hold almost effectively a mini SAG within the ground operations quality and safety team now, where we look at our risks, any notable events that might be reported, trends that are materializing through the reports that we're seeing, and we generate a weekly report now on the back of that, which we share with our ground operations delivery teams and the nominated persons within the organization as well, so that we've got that kind of like weekly visibility of absolutely everything that's going on, and that kind of like now aggregates and comes together, so we can build the end of the month report based on what we're seeing in the previous 4 weeks. So yeah, really similar from that point of view, that we've taken exactly the same approach. And I think that cadence is like really important at the moment, because the environment that we're in has changed from what we were used to previously. And I think it's really important that we don't just recognize that the status quo is going to stay the same. We know that it can change, and we've got to be on top of things and making sure that we pick up that when things do change, we can put actions in place quickly to address the risks that are materializing from that point of view. So really interesting. I think one of the things that's that we've learned over the last 2 years has been the importance of readiness. So we were very blessed, really, from an EasyJet point of view, that our safety management system was in a pretty decent place. We're spread out across 160 airports with not enough people to go around each one of those. So when the pandemic started, through our system, we had really good oversight already of what was taking place across the patch. The bit that we did put enhanced focus on was readiness activities. We developed a role, so we've now got a readiness manager within the ground operations team, and we're constantly tracking our readiness status. It was something that we'd always done historically for the winter season, because we know that the challenges that presents. But actually, when you think about it, that we do the biggest volume of flying within the summer. It's our busiest period of the year. So in theory, there is kind of like there's risk there that we need to think about. So readiness took a massive part of our workload up. We had to make sure that we're ready for the restart of operations following the restart of ops in summer 2020. We carried that on for last year, and then we've enhanced and built on that for this summer as well. And it's now a fundamental component of absolutely everything that we do within my team in ground ops.
Thank you, Nick. Just something that crossed my mind. During this safety board committee, do you discuss the impact of commercial decision or pressures stemming from the shareholders? How do you discuss that?
So from an EasyJet point of view, the culture is really good within our organisation. So when there have been decisions that have been taken, or there's pressures that are coming, we're still really rigorous with our change management processes. We've got strong processes and procedures in place, and before we implement change or action any decisions, we make sure that we follow that process and that protocol. And if something's not right, then we stand up and challenge it, and that's kind of like part of what we live and breathe.
And I think that's one of the challenges that different organisations have found through the pandemic is, there's more of those kinds of pressures. So it's interesting to see how people handle those. And certainly some safety managers I've talked to, just the understanding that this is, having to have those kinds of conversations is just part of the normal, work of the safety team.
That's correct. But the risk I see here is that sometimes people in charge of commercial activities or shareholders, they do not have necessarily a safety background. So how to mitigate this?
I think actually it's interesting because Nick, I was talking to Jim Pegram, who's your director of safety, obviously he's on our safety culture and leadership session. I remember him saying that there's specific training that operational and business people in the business get on the role of safety within the organization, which I found really, really interesting. And I know a model actually we're also going to talk about at the SAFE conference with Jim as well is, how do you educate other parts of the organization who might be focused on other priorities, I guess, quite naturally.
Yeah, I think from the point of view, somebody's always going to have an idea, aren't they, about something that they want to change. That goes without saying, and there's a lot of pressures that are coming down. But I think it's really important when that happens that we stand up. We're the experts within our organisation on safety management and change management. So when those ideas come, we've got to make sure that we follow the correct processes and challenge it when something's not right. We've got to have the confidence to be able to get up and say, yeah, that's not going to work for whatever reason that might be. I think that's absolutely key, but that comes from the top down in terms of the culture, and we just make sure that we stick to it.
And I guess that's similar challenges, Bjorn, maybe you have in Iceland. No, not challenges, but in terms of discussions you have to have within the organisation.
Yes, so we've thought of many ways to try to figure out how to get the best engagement when it comes to these discussions, and it comes back to this marketing ploy that, I mean, we've talked about this, John, about this storytelling about people from outside the operational safety. They kind of needed a bit of a different approach. So we do case studies. So we have a few stories within Iceland Air that we can tell that kind of touch on all these entities, from finance, marketing, customer relations, kind of getting everybody on board on what that means and what their role are. And it has helped a lot. And we do it's called Our Safety Culture. It's for all staff at the organization. So it's kind of to try to unify everybody under the same hat for discussions. But we're getting great feedback from other organizations. But the big changes within organization, of course, are almost always commercially driven. So we do have to. It takes time, and like we were talking about earlier, like Nick was saying about having robust management of change processes is key, and kind of trying to get as many people as possible on board working on those. But mostly it's just about how we engage with our people. So work is done or not as imagined, like we talk about all the time, is that's the most important discussion we have with our management.
Cool. And I guess, David, from your side, do you have similar challenges or similar discussions? I guess you do.
I think everyone does. It's as a smaller operation, also going through a fleet expansion, doubling our fleet with a decision made during the pandemic to double. That means you have engaged owners and shareholders in the business. But of course, it comes down to, I think we have a legislative structure that's very important in our EASA framework. We're the accountable manager position. When it comes into the safety culture and communicating to the shareholder or owner level, the accountable manager has to be ready to, go to battle as required. That being said, really it's knowing, knowing your goals and your targets. There's a difference between a goal and a target. A goal is something you'd like to reach, and a target is something you have to reach, and be as precise and close to hitting the bullseye as possible. But in order to do that, you really need to know and assess in your situation what you and your organization can achieve, what you can't achieve. And then you need to have the business plan. What are you going to do to fill the gaps to get from A to B? And that's something we've been doing and practicing throughout the pandemic, is because there's been nothing stable about our operations and business. It's been constantly changing of, what can we achieve today? Where do we need to be? And what resources, what plan? The readiness, as Nick has mentioned, it's readiness planning, scenario planning. And if anything, the pandemic has forced us to learn this. Okay.
Thank you, David. Maybe we can have a look to the poll and see what's going on. John, can we display?
Yep, so hopefully everybody can see the poll, the results of the poll on the side in the Slido. So it's interesting, it comes out. So the top of the three answers is partially then 41%, and we've had 114 votes, which is cool. And then yes, 32%, and no, 26%. So it's interesting.
It's quite interesting.
And I think it probably matches some of the discussions we've been having internally about, do we really understand the purpose of SMS as something there to help manage, enable safe operations versus, like a compliance process that you have to go through. And it's something JP and I spend a lot of time talking about, and certainly in terms of our promotion of how to do effective SMS. It's something, again, it's always an interesting challenge, is how we do that.
We have had many discussions about safety of the product, of safety of the services, but we probably do not have enough conversation about the impact of organizational factors and change in the organization. This is exactly what has been discussed.
Shall I start the next question part of the poll, and and then we do that while we carry on with the discussions and leave that running? So,
yes.
So the next question, do you want to explain the next question?
I can't read it from here.
Okay, it's easier for me, John. So yeah, it's basically, we're going to try to create a word cloud of basically the most important enablers people have found for managing the risk during COVID. So it's give a word to your most important enabler to help manage COVID. So we're going to leave that up for a little while and see what answers we get, and see what different things. We'll probably end up with 10 different things, the same thing spelt in 10 different ways. I always love the technology attempts of these word clouds. It's like anything. I remember when I built our first occurrence reporting system, and we left countries outside Europe as free text boxes, and there were 28 different ways to spell Morocco, we found out, which was kind of interesting. Anyway, let's carry on the discussion and maybe start talking about some of the solutions and what we're doing ahead, preparing for the summer now, shall we?
Yeah, and probably I will turn to Nick about interfaces, because I think it is probably at the heart of what you do. You have many interfaces to manage, especially when you are in charge of ground handling activities. Should it be at the level of should it be for the operator or for the aerodrome, for the company or for the aerodrome? So can you tell us a little bit about the risk entail at the interfaces?
So I think so within the ground operations area it is quite complex because of obviously all the contracted activities that we have. So the interface has been something that we've focused on a huge amount. So in terms of our readiness kind of like piece of work, we've been almost since January of this year, we started our readiness activities where we were trying to look at, right, what are the things that are important to us that we need to know of as we go into this summer. So and that was building on the work that's been done since summer 2020. We've tweaked the questions that we've been asking. We've also kind of like changed the approach slightly differently as well. So historically we would write out to our handling partners to say, are they prepared for summer, by asking them some key questions that we would then assess. But we changed it slightly this year. So we encouraged our ground operations delivery teams to go out and have those conversations directly with the airports rather than us asking the questions from a central perspective. And then they would have those conversations. They would sit in those meetings with airport authorities and our ground handling partners, look at the presentations that they were being provided, looking at the resource plans, etc., that we've got going in and their capabilities to deliver our summer schedule, etc. And then they would use their own local knowledge that they have, their own expertise, to come back and effectively determine what they thought the risk exposure was. So we did that for every single airport across the network, which is a huge piece of work on its own. Obviously, we then placed a little bit more focus on our network points where we've got higher volumes flying through there. So we did a little bit of additional work around that. And we came away with a really good picture then, knowing what we were going to be facing into for the summer season from an airport provision and from our ground handling provision. So we knew what our risks were. And when we were seeing things that were coming back as red or amber, we were making sure that we had mitigation strategies in place to tackle those particular risks. It's all well and good me sitting here and saying we think you should go and do this, but the solution for one airport is going to be completely different to the solution for another. And that was something that we fundamentally changed when we redesigned our safety management system about 3 or 4 years ago now. And that's put us into a really decent place now, that the top-down approach we didn't feel worked, so we had to take a bottom-up approach, and we let the airports and inform what the overall network risk picture was. So that's kind of like how we've managed the interface with our business partners going into this summer, and it's something that we keep on top of. So all the way through the summer now, on a weekly basis, we're checking in to see what the status is, to see what's changed, so that we can maintain that oversight, but also to make sure that the right actions are being taken where they need to be at a local level, so that we can give that kind of like prompt to our ground ops delivery teams to support them, because ultimately that's what our job is, in a central team, to support them and help them manage their airports in the best way that they possibly can.
Nick, I want to keep you talking about what you were saying. I assume that collaborative SMS play a big role in your business.
Yeah, it has to. Just the size and the scope of our operation means that collaboration is just fundamentally important to everything that we do. And because we don't have the boots on the ground in every single airport from an EasyJet point of view to be able to do the oversight that people traditionally think of. So our SMS is underpinned by reporting. It's absolutely fundamental to the safety management system. We need to make sure that we're getting decent reports through from our handling partners. We get lots of reports through from our crew and our pilots as well, and that helps us build up a picture of what's going on outside. And that's alongside the work that we do in terms of a standards assurance perspective from my team, and when our airport managers are out inside the airport, so that we can start to build that picture of everything that's going on. And without that, the whole thing falls apart. And for that to work, we need to collaborate with our handling partners. We need them to understand how important reporting is to the safety management system in EasyJet, because without it, it just doesn't function. And it's why we place such importance on that. It was interesting that Stephen commented before, I think it was, about the reduction in reporting rate. So we've seen exactly the same thing. It's not reduced huge amount, but it's gone down to a level where we wouldn't be 100% pleased with that. But we do see that when flying volumes increase, and there is that mismatch that sits there, that reporting levels go down as flying volumes increase. We definitely see more reports in the quieter periods of the year. So I think that's certainly something that we need to look at. And from a collaboration perspective, I think that's vitally important. But there's a number of challenges for me that come with that each individual airline has its own reporting system. Each handling agent has its own reporting system. So we're asking people to do the same piece of work twice. And I think the systems that we've got are sometimes a blocker or to making sure that we're getting the reports through that we want to see. I think the second aspect to it all as well is we're great at receiving reports on the event that's actually happened. The ones that I'm really interested in are the ones that nearly happened, because that tells us how our control measures are performing. It indicates what the culture is like within the organisations that we work with as well. So I think there could be a big push on what we call proactive reporting as well.
Mm-hmm. And many organizations at the airport, they are not required to establish an SMS. So how do you interact with these organizations? Do you meet them regularly? Do you involve them in your reporting system? How do you proceed?
So I think from our point of view, our primary interface is with our ground handling partners. So contractually, that stuff is within the contracts. So and yeah, they provide us with their oversight checks, which really helps us out. And then we look at their oversight checks to see whether or not we're seeing similar things through our reporting system as well. And then from that, we then generate actions on the back of it. For a lot of the organizations that we work with where we don't contract them directly, I think generally the feeling that we get in most of the cases that there is that engagement there. I think it's something that we could work on. I think the PRM service provision is a really kind of like good and poignant example at this moment in time, that we have conversations with them at local level, but obviously with them being contracted directly by airport authorities, it makes it difficult. So it's more about influencing rather than kind of like using contractual leverage in that situation.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I'm going to ask exactly the same question to Bjorn and David. Probably there is a need to coordinate between the maintenance organization, between the CAMO in charge of airworthiness of aircraft, and as well operation and availability of aircraft for operation. And in addition to that, probably there is a need to avoid accumulating factors, risk. For instance, an aircraft re-engage from storage into operation with air crew lacking a bit of a recent experience. So how do you coordinate between the air operator and the maintenance side?
So at least from Icelandair side, we have we have a 145 and then the airline, the CAMO, working together in Keflavik in our base, and we did see a lot, of course, issues with storage, like probably most operators, and that, you know, coordinating with the crew with a lot of errors or failures coming up on the aircraft, or having defects. So that's when kind of our collaboration and the system played a crucial part in kind of getting this information between all these organizations effectively. But in the beginning, it was kind of siloed to be, you know, because coming up out of COVID and everything like that. But we've gotten a firm grasp on it now. But we're seeing the same as we were talking about earlier. Like Nick was saying about the highest peak season having the lowest reporting, and David I talked about that as well in the beginning. So it's something that we are looking at as well, and we have been seeing that you know, now we have a ramp up going on, and the volume is nearly reaching its peak, but we're still seeing less reports throughout the organization. So we're not seeing it in all of them. It's just, it seems to be when there's more to do, people have less time to talk, and it's something we need to talk about openly, because it should be the more sectors we fly, like you guys said earlier. But it's this collaboration that we, you know, trying to figure out, talking with people, not only just looking at the reports, just engaging with the individuals out on the ramp, and having discussions. But as an airline, from the airline perspective, of course, with all these stations, we do have all these different interfaces and different systems that are set up differently. So we try to have at least, once every quarter, an engagement or an engaging conversation with our handlers, for example, in ground handling. So for the northern part of Europe, we have the same ground handler, so we can have a really good discussion there, for example. And but we are facing like many other airlines, short-staffed airports and ground handling. So we're seeing all kinds of things happening that are motivated by all this ramp up. For example, we've had one or two cases of the flight crew physically loading the aircraft because there was no availability of staff at the airport. So then you kind of face the question: is this something that we should encourage or not? Because ideally we want the individual certified and competent to do it, but when you're facing maybe a lack of resources at the airport, at the handler level, we have a big discussion on how are we going to solve this issue? How are we going to be on time, on the right place? And this is one of the big informative discussions we're having at the moment, and I think a lot of organizations are dealing with the same issue.
David, from the maintenance perspective, how do you get prepared for the peak increase of traffic for summertime?
Well, that's a difficult one. If you're lucky, you've been able to plan ahead and prepare and invest in people and resources, but that's sort of the best case scenario. Currently looking at on a safety management perspective of the ramp up, the one point, and also here in the program here today, deals with collaboration. That's a very important aspect. Again, as with Icelandair, we have our own, although we're a fairly small operator, we have our own 145. That's helped us because we have a direct link. Next door to me is my MPCA, so we're in daily contact. The lines of communication are very short and clear. But the collaboration with third-party maintenance providers, the interaction or linking, and I think Nick mentioned this, we all have our SMS systems and reporting systems, but we're not really joined up at the hip. It's difficult to know what's being fed in from one provider. That could be a potential risk for us as an operator or for us as an AMO. And that's something moving forward that we're going to have to, I think, look into. Tackling some of the day-to-day actual now that we're in the middle of the ramp up has been putting feet on the street in our flight operations, also in our maintenance operations, going into our providers, not waiting. Initially, we were waiting for them to tell us where the problems were occurring. But then when suddenly a service provider isn't even at the aircraft, then we realize that there's a problem. There's no report because there's nobody there. How do you handle that? Do you let the crew start loading bags, or how do you jump in proactively to deal with the scenario? And that's led us in the last 2 weeks to start at management level, accompanying and visiting our providers, but also being at the airport as flights are going in and out. Not just waiting for the reporting system to bring us the message, but going out and looking for the message that needs to be brought into the system, into our organization. And I think that's really the key difference right now is that a reporting system, you're waiting for the message to be brought to you. Right now, we have to be much more proactive, and we have to go find out, get our finger on the pulse and find out where the problems are to ensure that the risks from our partners are not going to float into our organization, become our risks as well.
Thank you, David. I would have a lot to ask you about that. There would be specifically a question for you in the...
I was going to say, it's been particularly interesting to see this theme in the questions about reporting. I mean, it's interesting in the word cloud poll. So you have to actually take part in the poll to see the word cloud. For those of you that didn't, haven't yet, particularly words like resilience, collaboration are really coming up. And, similarly in the questions, it's interesting. There are various questions about particularly how do you get reports from contracted organizations, third-party providers, all of these things. And I think this is where particularly as you've all talked about, taking the opportunity to collaborate and talk about safety to your providers, so that effectively you're not just sat there, well, nobody's filled out a report, so there's nothing we can do kind of thing. Is create these opportunities for routine coordination and collaboration. I think that it's been great the way that has come out during all three of your kind of discussions there.
Do we have any change to display the outcome of the Slido poll?
On the first one, you mean?
Yeah, or the one you have.
Oh, this word. So the words cloud. It's interesting. So the top word is communication, collaboration, and then we also then have flexibility, reporting, risk management, resilience, empathy. In fact, really interesting. Humans is another one. I think this is one of the things generally during the pandemic is this. I think the need for empathy in our organizations and what kind of organizations do we want has really come to the fore, I think. And actually, one thing we did get a question about, or kind of comment or a question was, in terms of the context when we talk about COVID-19 risks, is specifically in this context, we're not talking about COVID and the pandemic and the health risks. We're specifically talking about the operational safety risk we face as organizations due to the pandemic and all the other things that are going on in the world, rather than the health risk. So just to clear that up for Nabil, who asked that question a bit earlier on.
And by the way, anything you would like to report about the well-being of people? Did you notice something in your organization? And if yes, how did you manage that?
Oh, who wants to go? In fact, David, maybe we come to you first, because I remember coming to see you in your hangar and you talking about some of the challenges, particularly with the rescue helicopter operating from the same environment and trying to main aircraft, and all of those kind of human elements were really challenging for you, even in your hangar in Cologne.
Yeah, well-being and COVID-19. Well, even this morning, we're testing here twice a week, and every Monday morning, I'm scared to look at the roster and just see how many people are missing. It's something we've gotten used to, but it's moved from a lot of our operational flight. The flight crews and cabin used to have the highest illness rate due to COVID, but now it's moved into my organization. Between 10 to 20% off due to quarantine measures, because we still have if you test positive, you're 10 days quarantine until you can you can test yourself free at 5 days. So automatically, there's a no questions asked policy. If there's two dashes on the test, preferably you've done the test before you've come to work. As soon as we have somebody in the area that's got 2 dashes and everybody goes to a daily testing regime, we just hope that, and luckily that most of our COVID-related illnesses seem to be going through relatively light now, but it's a constant stress. And I think it's not just the COVID; it's also the well-being goes on the emotional and psychological side as well. I have a colleague whose daughter's getting married this next week, and was sharing an office with someone who tested positive.
Is it something you care about in your organization, for instance, with the increasing cost of living? I'm not talking anymore COVID-19, but the rise of prices and so on and so on. Do you feel any impact on people and human performance?
Initially, at this moment in time, the actual cost of living, I think that real inflation is going to hit us moving forward. Those that have a longer commute have seen it immediately. The cost in groceries, the cost of heating your home will hit us as we move into autumn and winter. That really hasn't come down too hard on the employee level. On the operational level, it's definitely, there's operational costs have increased significantly. Mm-hmm. There's no doubt on that. But then it's, again, looking at the, where's the long-term cost? Are we looking at temporary measures? The prices are increasing everywhere. How can we follow suit with wages and salary structures? Plus, we're moving into a very competitive market. We all need employees, and we're probably all paying a little bit more than we were a year ago.
And I think these are all interesting, kind of difficult challenges. Maybe Bjorn, on the well-being side with yourselves in Iceland there, obviously I was really lucky to come and kind of see some of that firsthand in October, and all the different things you've been doing across the organization. How's that going for you?
So I mean, through the organization, it's the dynamic is quite different. So you have this group of flight crew that are coming back, that have been sitting and waiting to start flying again, and of course are immensely you see a very positive signs there. People are very happy and they're glad to be back and very enthusiastic about being part of the airline, the system, and kind of making things work. But then on the other side, we have resource allocation issues in ground operations, for example, where we have a lot of industries in Iceland that are competing for the same staff. And it becomes very hard to kind of, it becomes this market of people trying to compete on who gets the employees. So, I mean, for example, in ground operations, this is something that we feel. On the maintenance side as well. So we had to lay, of course, off some maintenance technicians through COVID. And a lot of individuals might have found similar paying jobs or some other jobs that are that they can use their technical expertise for as well. So these are individuals that we are losing in between as well. So this is a big struggle. But on the whole, the well-being within the organization, we've kind of had to do a lot with that as well. We've had a few initiatives. We have a health manager in place at Icelandair. And we have health and well-being initiatives almost weekly, where we have experts from all the way from sleep to rest, workload management, stress, where we help give our organization and the people within the organization opportunity to educate themselves on how to kind of think about their mental health and well-being, which is very important. But then at the end of the day, sometimes it just comes down to as well the external economic environment, where you have rising house prices in Iceland. Iceland imports most of its resources, so steel, concrete, and all that stuff. So that all affects individuals working in the environment, with the salary staying, not developing as fast as the prices are rising. So we are monitoring that, and we're having a open discussion about it every week and every month. But it's a hard reality to deal with at the moment, at least.
And I guess, Nick, from your side, you've got kind of such a scale that it's, I know a lot of your effort goes into the networks that you build across your organization itself, but then with all of your partners, and kind of continually nurturing that kind of intelligence network to get information going and keep people kind of happy and moving along, and all that's kind of supporting the operation, isn't it?
Yeah, I think there's probably two levels. Certainly when I think about well-being, there's two elements. So it's the well-being of people that are working around our operation, but the well-being of the people that are within our organisation and within our team as well. And I think if I start with a bit from within our team, we have an employee assistance program which we can use. There are the support materials there that are available for us to rely on, to use when we feel that we need to. But I think as a line manager, it starts with just making sure that you're having those conversations with your team informally, not about work. So it's something that we do every Monday morning. The first thing that we do is we get together as a group, especially when we're remote working now, and we just have a chat about how the weekend's gone, how everybody's feeling, and then let people get stuff off the chest, and it kind of like sets the scene for the start of the week. So we have those check-ins regularly on a Monday morning. We speak to each other all the time. I've got to say that I've got an incredibly supportive line manager, an incredibly supportive director, and we have those discussions about well-being in our kind of like monthly chat catch-ups that we have as a department, etc. And I think that's like really, really important, because you've got to start with yourself before you move on anywhere else. And I think then from a resilience and well-being point of view with around the operation, it's something that we recognize that we want people to be in the best possible shape when they're working around our aircraft, for the safety of themselves and for the safety of the people that are flying on our aircraft, either as passengers or as crew. Through the reporting systems, you talked about intelligence. We had a really open discussion I think it was the month before last in our safety action group, where a lot of the airport operations and contract managers brought to us the same concern, which was the level of overtime that was being completed by people within the ground handling industry at this moment in time to deliver the operation. That's in kind of like May and June. The concern that we raised on the back of that, and we took it away to have discussions about it, was the risk of fatigue and burnout. And if that's happening now in June, where are we going to be when we get to the end of the summer? And I think that's something that we need to be really mindful of, that people are under a lot of pressure at this moment in time, and kind of like, what do we do about that? And I think to a degree, there's only so many hours in the day, or there's only so many minutes in a turnaround as well. And I think for us, certainly the focus within ground operations has been that safety absolutely has to come first. And it's a message that we always talk about, but it's formed the backbone of our campaign that we've launched for this summer, which is safety first every time, take the time to complete tasks safely, and always follow the correct procedures. We've got kind of like monthly themes that we're going to be going through as well to talk about elements of that, such as rush and distraction, the importance of reporting, the importance of following procedures, the importance of culture, for example. So we've got to make sure that that message lasts, because it's sort of like morally, I think that everybody has the right to come to work and go home safely at the end of the day, and we've got to make sure that we absolutely live and breathe that. That we go out, share that message, to make sure that the frontline staff that we speak to, we were in Paris a couple of weeks ago speaking to people, to make sure that they understood that we'd much rather take write the report for a flight being delayed than the report for a safety event happening. I think that's absolutely key, and we've got to get out there, lead from the front on that message, because there are commercial pressures that have been talked about. It's more important to us within EasyJet that sort of like flights are operated safely and people go home at the end of the day. That's absolutely key to everything that we're doing at this moment in time.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head. That last bit particularly has resonated. A lot of discussions I've had with people across the industry in terms of, and interesting, the word cloud, communication and collaboration, still the two biggest kind of words there. And it's that, quite often, if you aren't explicit in saying those things that you've all said there, particularly at the end there, Nick, about safety being important, and this is why we'd rather you take that bit of extra time. Quite often there's the perception, if you don't explicitly say that in the organization, sometimes the staff assume that actually we just got to get the job done as quickly as possible. And it's it's important just to have that conversation, because otherwise the staff perception versus the management kind of, well, this is what we want to happen, but it's not happening. Is quite often it's the communication link that I think is one of the challenges.
Yeah, I think just to add to that, so Stephen mentioned targets before, and there are obviously targets in place. The feedback that we got when we went to the Paris airports the week before last was, it was really good to hear that message direct from the operator, because sometimes you get that message and it'll come via the operator through a local management team at a handling partner or whatever it was. But actually for staff to hear us say that this is our priority, it helped make that message land. And it's the reason why we're going to be going around as many airports as we can now throughout the rest of the summer, to make sure that people kind of like understand that that is our message, and it should be our message all of the time, not just for now, but at this moment in time, it's just critically important.
And I think that, as you say, particularly where you have contracted services, for the contracted service partner to hear that from the airline, the operator, or in any context, the people that are contracting that service, just really adds to that the importance of the message, which I think is a really great one and really key one to sell. What we're going to do, we've got sort of 10 minutes for some questions now, perhaps. So we move. I'm going to start the last of the word cloud kind of polls, and it's specifically about what is your biggest challenge or risk with the increase of activities over the coming summer, and just be interesting to kind of gauge that. And again, if you take part, then you get to see the word cloud, and we're just interested to see how that builds up.
We can pick up the first question.
Yeah, I'm just sorry, I've got so many screens here in the studio.
I can read it if you want.
Oh, no, it's fine. I have to go back there to the Q&A. There we go.
So the most voted question is, as operators, how does your SMS feed into your contracted maintenance organization? Commercial pressure is applied by airlines onto the maintenance organization. This is a significant issue for the maintenance organization. Who wants to answer that one?
Well, in fact, it's interesting because I think that's related not just in terms of maintenance, but what Nick was talking about there about other contracted services. And I guess you all have slightly different takes on that. Maybe David's side, as an organisation where you're all together, I guess. But do you do maintenance for other organisations as well? Do you have that kind of challenge?
For us, not so much. Not so much during the pandemic. A little bit, but our core focus is our own fleet. So extrapolating from that out, not just with AMO, but it's again dealing with the complete the collaboration with all of your partners, from ground services through to catering, through it's not just, as you mentioned, John. It's not just specific to the AMO. But yes, the AMO is probably the most important interface required due to the sheer volume of contracted maintenance. I look at it slightly different because we also contract maintenance out at certain outstations. And that's where we see, we have certain operations where we have agreements to share our SMS reports and information. But generally, quite often you fall back to a compliance status. Are they an audited partner? Are they, competent and capable for what they're doing? And we lose, the focus isn't strong enough on the actual safety management perspective.
And I think this is where in all of the discussions, it really comes back to the, there is reporting, and that's one important thing, but then it's the, as you've all talked about, the opportunities you've created, whether within your organizations or with other partners, in order to kind of capture those hazards and risks and the challenges, and then figure out what we do about them. And actually, it's interesting because maybe we jump to the next question, because I was particularly interested about this element, is the challenge of how do you get feedback to the front line, whether it's from reports or just generally if you're, if you have a check-in with a contracted partner, or even a part of the organization. Maybe Bjorn, if I come to you first on this one, is how do you feed, when you do something, when you've had a report or a piece of information, how do you get feedback to the staff on, to encourage them to keep reporting?
So that's a great question. We have numerous ways of promulgating the information. The first one is, of course, to the reporter itself, making sure that the reporter is being heard, and we're all familiar with that process. From Icelandair side, we do safety topics of the month. So we compile the reports that we think are the most important with our side groups that we do, and we highlight these are the safety incidents that came in this month, and this is how we solve them. This is how it affects your life, and we do safety then topics which we have on screens around the organization, which kind of as well encourages coffee shop talk by the water cooler. So you have a screen there and you see the safety topic of the month, and you're like, well, you have these great conversations, and we've had good feedback from that. And then, of course, like most organizations, we do it with in the end of letters and bulletins and safety analysis briefs and so forth. But the most we get most out of the engaging conversations on just stating a topic and then having the individuals just talking about them, and that really helps us having an open discussion about it. And we've had some good feedback on that in the last year now, on just being very visible on what's being reported into the system. But it's a very delicate balance, of course, as you realize, if individuals feel that their information is safety sensitive or something like that, or very sensitive in nature, that it's being put forth very kind of blasé. So we're always dancing on that line, just talking about these subjects first generally, and then maybe not specific days or flights or so forth.
Mm-hmm. And that's interesting that all those different initiatives. It shows that it's one of the things we talk about here in our team, particularly in safety promotion, is that it's always about a range of solutions. There isn't a one kind of silver bullet thing you do. You have to work at lots of different opportunities to try and do that. And I guess maybe, Nick, if I come to you, and particularly when you're working with your contracted providers and across such a diverse network, how do you get that feedback kind of thing going?
So I think Bjorn's just made some really good points, and there are some real synergies there between kind of like what's going on at Iceland there and what we do within EasyJet. So the first thing is absolutely spot on, which is about when a report is submitted, every report that's submitted gets a response. Sometimes that may be automated depending on the ERC score that comes through. But yeah, every report gets a response to the person that's made the report, and if they're not satisfied with the response that's been submitted, then we've got the opportunities then to go back and look at the feedback that we as investigators have provided as part of that reporting process. Another aspect is through our ground operations SAG, we generate key safety messages on a monthly basis. So they are almost the pertinent topics of the month that we want our ground handling agents to go out and share. So we just generate a one-page document, which is our key safety messages for the month, and that will go through what the issue is, what people should be doing, and then the references that they can refer to, whether that's our own documentation or whether it's external documentation as well. So that's kind of like one page of key points for focus in the month. We also try and do something called learning from others, and this touches on your point, Bjorn, about having those discussions. So we use the learning from others concept where we talk about safety events that we've had, what caused them, what was the outcome from them, and we use them then as a basis for discussion, or we ask our handlers to use that as a basis for discussion, not with closed questions. So we won't ask questions like, did you do this? So you get a yes or a no answer. We'd ask questions such as, what's your process for this? And then get people within a group to try and talk around that. How could it be improved? Do you know, so that you generate that discussion around it. So rather than having a really closed answer to a question, I think that's really important, and something, if I was being completely honest, we need to be kind of like better at getting shared and pushed out. We also have our safety campaigns, and we've talked about the one from an EasyJet point of view for this summer. But I think for me, that tackles EasyJet specific problems that we've got. I think the reality is that a lot of us are sharing shared problems at this moment in time, and I think that's where the power of collaboration comes absolutely to the fore. If you just think about it from a basic principle, and it's something that we've talked about numerous times, John, if we've got the same safety problem or the same problems being encountered across multiple organizations, the first thing that we've got to do is identify what those are. So what are the key ones? Because you can't fix everything. I think that's the first point that you've got to kind of like understand. You can't fix everything. So you've got to pick the ones that you think are most important. And that's not the stuff that's important to me. It's the stuff that's important to everybody. So what are the other airlines saying? What are the other handling agents saying, etc.? Find out what the challenges are. And then I think we've got to come together to make sure that we're tackling that problem collaboratively, because for me, there's much more mileage in us all in industry talking about the same problem at the same time with the same key messages. We were talking about the different ways earlier on for handling agents to kind of like do things, and we talk about how many different ways there are to chock an aeroplane, and that makes it really confusing. So if we've got a handling agent with 10 different carriers, 20 different carriers in their portfolio being given 20 different messages, the chances of those messages landing with a handling agency are slim. So if we've got one message that we can agree on and we push that out, I think that's immensely more powerful than everybody doing things on their own.
And it's interesting you mentioned that, and in terms of timing. So the other part of that question was also then about feedback from all of the things that reporters send into, whether it's EASA or the national authorities. And with our annual safety review just being finished now, that gives us a great opportunity to use that. And we've started to do that already. But like you say, Nick, to be really clear collaboratively, what are those messages? And I think particularly that's where then at Safe 360 in September is being able to kind of take what we see in the data from the safety review and then talk about it with the industry there in Brussels in the room, and then really be more increase how effective we are at sharing those. And that's particularly what we want to, hopefully the community site. We have a Conversation Aviation LinkedIn group where we do that more as well. So I realize we're coming up to the time, so maybe we just want a quick summary from yourself, Jean-Pierre.
As usual, we are running short of time, but I have now seen some important key messages from our panelists. Again, I would like to thank you again. But the importance of a safety board committee, managing top safety issue, and maybe one lesson learned was the increase of frequency, to have more frequent meeting with the top management to report safety issue. And reporting has been something we have extensively discussed today. Communication is a key element of the system. Provided feedback to the reporter is also quite important. I have also noted down that engage with people. That's something. Engaging with people is something very important. Anticipate. It's better probably to manage by a walk around in the different department and discussing with people rather than managing the issue behind the screen or behind the computer. So it's really important to have this safety discussion with the staff. Another point I have noted is also the importance of collaborative SMS and to find solution all together. There are probably more to say, especially on availability of resources, well-being, and so on. But I hope we can touch upon this topic later Wednesday with the last session about culture and leadership and wrap-up. I would like also to mention that some questions have not been answered, but there are not so many, so we will take them and we will answer later to the people who wrote the question, and especially.
And I've managed to answer a couple of them for the individuals, but we'll summarize them and put them on the community site.
And I guess for the implementation date for SMS for part 145, I'm sure my colleagues Wednesday will answer that one.
And actually, I put a link to the session we did a couple of months ago to that person in the chat, so we've got that set.
Excellent. As promised, I will give you the last word, John, to introduce the next session. But before that, I would like to ask our guest just to give one key message, an important enabler facing this disruptive event.
Try and do 30 seconds for each panelist then. So David, maybe we come to you first.
Okay, well, I'll try to keep it short. Keyword, diligence. Diligence. We need to be proactive. We need to look outside of the boundaries of our own departments and operations. We're all in this together. The problems that it's interesting, out of the different branches that we represent here as panelists, I think 90% is common ground. So leading that into collaboration. Okay, that would be my comment.
Fantastic, David. And Bjorn next.
30 seconds. All right. I think I'm probably going to say the same as Nick probably, but collaboration is key here. We are all facing very similar issues. I think we need to have more open discussions. EASA Safety Week is a fantastic platform for that. And, we've talked a lot about today. I saw one question about being proactive. We talked about, being more proactive. So that's something that we can have a better discussion about in the industry as well.
Fantastic. Thanks, Bjorn. And then last but not least, Nick.
Yeah, I love something different. So I'm going to say supervision. I think it's more important now than it's ever been before. And with the challenges that we see across industry with resourcing, it's really easy to become heads down and complicit in the operation. It's really important that organizations take that step back to make sure that they maintain their oversight of what is going on, because without that, we lose the intelligence. And that's absolutely critical for me.
Fantastic. Thanks very much. And a huge thanks to the three of you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
All of your effort in preparing, and thanks to JP, and hopefully you all enjoyed that session. And the next one we have, so we're going to have a quick toilet break, and the team will be in from the safety risk management team to talk about the safety issues at 12 o'clock Central European time. So thanks very much, everybody. And
thanks again to our
panelists. And
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Okay, thanks everybody. We're going to close down this session now. So thank you. What's happening here? Yeah.